So Rez Khan is the co-founder and chief product officer of Pace, a New York City-based startup helping modern enterprise sales teams use product data to monitor and effectively work with their customers. He leads engineering, data science, product, and design there. And prior to Pace, he spent a long time building high-performance PM teams and infrastructure products for organizations like AppNexus, MongoDB, Department of Energy, and others. Welcome, Rez.
Really excited to be here. Good morning from New York. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I saw that people are from all over the world, which is super exciting and interesting to meet product folks from from places like outside New York. So like Scott mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the relationship between sales and product managers. And this is a especially important topic if you happen to work in a B2B software company where sales plays a very pivotal role in making sure your product is in the hands of customers and these customers are paying for the product. And having a good relationship between sales and product is key to unlocking sustainable long-term revenue. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. Before we start, just want to do a quick, re-intro of myself. Scott did a little bit. Like he mentioned, I'm the founder of a company called Pace. We're based out of New York City. We are a product-led sales platform, which means in plain English, what we do is we help companies who have a product-led growth motion, aka a freemium self-service product, figure out who their best or most at-risk customers are, so that the sales, account management, and customer success team can properly engage with them. To do so, we use the data those customers have about their users and use the data to figure out when someone is trending in a positive direction to how they're using the product, negative direction, etc. I run engineering, product, and data teams there. I spent 4 years at MongoDB prior to that, which is an open source database company building and commercializing their cloud product. And then I started my career in technology at a company called AppNexus, working in solutions engineering. And to those who don't know, solutions engineering is a very interesting role where you essentially are part of the sales team, but you are the technical sales team. And you work with your sales counterparts to figure out the customer pains and needs and design a solution for it. So net and net, I've spent a lot of time in the intersection of sales and product. And I've had my fair share of very good relationship with sales and very bad relationship with sales. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about how not to make the mistakes I had made in the past. Awesome. A bit about me personally. As you can see from the picture, this is the best product I've released to date. My son Rami, who was born 2 weeks ago. We also call him Little Chicken because he's very small. He's only 5 pounds, but he's as I was telling Scott a few minutes back, a very active baby. I was born and raised in Bangladesh. I'm a first-generation immigrant to the United States. Moved here when I was 19 for college. I live in the city of New York. If you have any questions or want any fun things to do in New York, please let me know. I've been here in the city for over a decade now. And like I mentioned, I'm a new dad. So yeah, so let's jump to the topic of the day. I could talk about Rami all day, but I'm sure you want to hear that. So yeah, so let's jump in. The reason that this is an important topic is because B2B organizations that do product and sales well, they can experience a compounding effect. The idiom that is often used to describe this is 2 + 2 is greater than 4. And this is especially true definitely true in software companies that have a very classic enterprise sales motion where the product is being sold by a sales team. But it is also true in a product-led growth organization where the product is directly acquired by the users organically, but sales also plays a very pivotal role in increasing the size of the value of each account. Historically speaking, these two roles tended to butt head quite a lot. And the reason for that is sales is often looked upon as the voice of the customer because they're the ones talking with magnitudes of more customers than oftentimes product is. So they tend to have a very strong point of view of what customers need and what will actually make the company money. Product, or at least modern product management, is all about being like very customer centric and knowing what like the customer wants. And there oftentimes is friction between these two organizations on who is the right voice of the customer. The reality is like, both of them are from very different angles, and we'll talk about like, what those are today. Awesome. So the reason why a good collaboration is important is pretty simple. Like, and you got to look at what these different roles are for. So the role of product management in a B2B organization or even a B2C organization is to build things that provide customers some value. And ideally, this value is high enough that customers pay money for it. The role of sales is to be responsible for finding those customers, understanding their needs, and convincing them to buy. And they both play off each other very closely. For example, because sales is responsible for understanding customer needs and convincing them to buy the product, they can give very good feedback on what products are resonating, what objections they're getting when they're trying to sell the product, which is important to build good products. On the other side, sales people have a very good market and customer understanding, but might not necessarily have a very deep technical understanding of the product that product manager might. So product is a very good source of feedback for sales on how to talk about it, how to handle objections, how to even like, position it against competitors, etc. So they both need to be communicating very closely with each other for the flywheel to like, work well. And if you don't, really bad things happen in the company. And, within your own organizations, you might have seen bits and pieces of that. So classic ones are you're building stuff that doesn't help close more deals or close higher value deals. Another one is you're building things that prioritizes short-term goals only. This happens a lot in organizations where the power structure is more sales-driven, which means the salespeople or the sales organization have more say over the product roadmap. In those organizations, you have swung the pendulum to like to the other direction completely, and you might be prioritizing things that help you close deals, but doesn't like lead to long-term accrued customer value. So that's a thing to like watch out for as well. And like I mentioned, even in organizations where the product is quote unquote selling itself, like the product-led growth organizations, sales has a very critical role in figuring out how to increase the amount of dollars you can make per customer. In fact, the company that I built, Pace, was solely trying to like solve the problem in bullet number 3. And the last one is, from the sales side, if you are not communicating properly with product or product leadership, you will tend to have low close rates because you lack the critical product knowledge to be able to sell the product effectively. And this is especially true in very competitive environment and in environments such as this, where there's so much budgetary constraint that you need to be like on your game to be able to like sell the products. And you need to like have very deep product knowledge, and that's where product managers can help. Awesome. So we're gonna address this question. We're gonna like break this down as like 2 questions, and I'm gonna try to give you some very tactical things that I have done in my career to answer these questions and make a good conducive environment between sales and product. The first question is, how can you get better at getting good feedback from sales on what to build? In other words, how do you make them a good input into the product planning and road mapping exercise that you do? And the second question that we're going to talk about is, as a product manager, how do you give better feedback to your sales counterpart so that they can get better success when they're selling, either better close rates or selling like higher value contracts or selling into like even the right customers? So let's look at question number 1 first. How can you get better feedback from sales on what to build? So the first thing is very important, which is not often talked about, and oftentimes product leaders or product people, and even sales leaders, sales people in companies just assume that everyone knows about it. But I found that people are not often very clear on this. The first thing is you want to communicate the incentives very clearly. Like, what is the incentive of product? What is the incentive of sales? And where you align versus not align, and what time frame. So the places where product and sales are very aligned is product is incentivized to build products and experiences that customers use and get value for and pay money. And sales wants that too, because they have to sell those to those customers to make their quota. So that's where you're super aligned, that there's no question there. The tricky part is like where you're not aligned, or not 100% aligned, at least in the short to medium time frame. The thing with product people is you have to think in like, two horizons. You have to think about the next quarter, like, oh, what do I build in the next quarter to hit like my KPIs, which is where you align with sales, because sales tends to think in the quarterly or 2-quarter time ranges, like what do I need to do to hit my quota. But what product also needs to do is to think in a multi-year horizon. So what are the investments that you need to make now that might not yield any immediate benefit because they're highly experimental, you don't really know whether they'll be successful in the market, they take a long time to build, and can deprioritize more shorter, like quick wins. Those are the things that don't really affect sales in the quarterly range, but can affect sales over the course of years. So setting that expectation with them upfront with sales leaders is very helpful to like tell them that, hey, I don't just make decisions based on what's going to help you tomorrow. I have to make decisions about what's going to happen in the next, like in a couple of years. So the second thing I do, like, when I jump into a new organization, or when I'm like trying to like work with my sales counterparts, is create an environment which is conducive to giving feedback to product. And this is also something interesting that I observed. The superpower that product folks have is they are really good at giving feedback and hearing negative feedback from customers. But they oftentimes, you don't realize, like, other people might not be like as good at giving feedback. So it is on you in a way to create an environment where that feedback giving is safe and highly conducive. So how do you do that? The first one is, I think structure always helps. And sales teams especially like structure because that's how they operate. Like they have, in Salesforce, you go in and you have your specific stages you need to hit. You have specific like criteria that you need to fulfill if you can change the status of an account from negotiating to like in a closed one, etc. So putting some structure in place on how you get feedback from sales and sales leadership is very useful. So very few simple things you can do is you can have structured meetings to do pipeline reviews. So a very classic one is you do close loss analysis, which means, every quarter or every month you sit down with a handful of sales folks or sales leaders and you talk about what are the things that we lost and why did we lose it? Is it because there's a product gap? Is it because our pricing and packaging was wrong? Is it because the salesperson was new and did not have the knowledge? Like there could be a bunch of reasons, but creating a forum where we can objectively talk about why things were lost and being present and asking good questions in that forum is super valuable in getting good feedback. And on the other side, you can do the same thing with your wins. So why did we win a particular account? And it's interesting, oftentimes when you win an account, the companies celebrate, but sometimes you could be winning the account for the wrong reasons. And you want to know about that too ahead of time so you can optimize the product. The second bit is, training on what feedback is helpful is very useful for sales teams. So for example, the type of feedback that I really like to hear from sales teams are things like, what is the market trend that you're observing? Because they're talking with 100 customers to the every 10 customers I can talk with, because that's literally what their job is, to talk to customers. So they intuitively can get a better sense of what trends they're seeing in the market. than I may be able to by having like deeper conversation with like 10 customers. So that's like one feedback that I really like to listen to. The other feedback obviously is competitive landscape. So when you're in a deal, if you're in a competitive situation, what are you hearing? What do people like about the competition versus your product? Those are like really good feedback to hear. And the last one, I think, which is the most important one, is to hear feedback about pushbacks. So what are the reasons why, obviously, why a customer might not purchase your product, but also like what are the reasons why a customer might push back purchasing the product by a few months, or push back on introducing the salesperson to, let's say, a technical person in the company who is responsible for implementing the product. Those pushbacks and understanding those are very important, not just because it helps you build a better product experience, but also because it helps you figure out what type of enablement materials are needed for the sales team to overcome those pushbacks. The last one is, and this is also very important, is you are getting a lot of information out of them, and you want to make them feel heard and make them feel as if their inputs into the product planning process is taken seriously and is official. And there are various ways of doing that. Like I have seen things like having a percentage of time allocated to a particular quarter on quick wins for sales. Like I've seen that being successful. Or I have seen people do things like attribute a particular product idea to a sales team or a salesperson who initially gave that particular feedback. So calling out when you're incorporating their feedback is a simple way to get them really excited about collaborating more with you. So that's one. The other bucket is you also have to set expectation with them that if you want their feedback to be taken seriously, they need to come to the table prepared properly. So one of the classic mistakes I've seen non-product people do is they tend to talk about ideas as solutions. They would say that, oh, we need this red button in the product because the customer asked for a red button, or they used another product which had the red button and they liked the red button. What's really helpful though is not the solution, it's the problem, like you guys know. So articulating things, if you can train them to articulate things as there are lots of buttons in the product and this button is the most important button and customers need to see it quickly, hence if it's red, it's good. That's more helpful for product folks than just stating the solution. Coming in with evidence is obviously very helpful. And the evidence could be anything from, I lost this client, which could have been worth this much money because we didn't have this product, or I've heard this feedback from the last 5 conversations I had over the past 1 week. And it's important to state that the feedback you want from sales isn't necessarily to, it's not like you're not trusting them, that your job is to take product feedback from a lot of different stakeholders, including customers, and dispassionately and logically figure out what's the best thing for the company to do, and those data points help you do it, and explaining that to a saleswoman why that is important also goes a long way. Scott, how are we doing on time?
You're doing just fine. 8:20.
Great, awesome. I'm not looking at the chat, so if you guys have any questions, I'll do it at the end of the talk. The last one is a bi-directional feedback loop, which means treat them as partners, treat them as valuable members of the company, which they are. If you are accepting their feedback, call it out like I mentioned. If you're not accepting a particular feedback, clearly communicate why you're not doing it. The why not should be delivered factually without sugarcoating it. They might disagree with the reasons why you're not doing it, but believe me, not knowing the reason is worse than knowing the reason and disagreeing with it. That just builds confidence and trust within the team. And if you ever made the wrong call, that you did not do something that they wanted you to do, call it out, say that you made a mistake. That also builds confidence and trust. Cool. Awesome. Then I'm going to move on to the next, thematic, question that the other side of the coin that is also important, which is how can you as a product manager give better feedback to sales on having better success in selling. And it's an interesting dynamic, because salespeople are very good at doing sales. They're good at building relationships. They're good at negotiating. And you don't want to come across as, I know how to do your job, because you might, but not as good as them probably, because that's their job and they've been doing it for years. And you have a different skill set. So it's helpful to have a mental model of what's a good do, what's a good don't on how to give feedback to your business development counterparts. So it's important to know where they need help from you and where they're probably very self-sufficient. So where they need help from you is, number one is roadmap. And this is especially true for enterprise SaaS companies where you're selling into other enterprises. Knowing what's coming in 3 to 6 months can often help grease the wheels of a particular deal. Because when you're buying an enterprise product, yeah, you're buying it for the problem to be solved now, but you're also signing multi-year deals, and you're also buying the future problems this particular product will solve for you. So that's one area that they need your help and expertise on. The other one is product depth, which means you are the one who knows in depth about how the product works, where are the holes, how it doesn't work, how customers actually use it, etc. And they would want information from you about that. And they might also want you to step into some meeting to give that depth context as needed, which you totally should whenever you get the chance. The third thing is they want stories of customers being successful. And customer success doesn't mean that they bought our product. Customer success means they bought a product, they used it over many, many years. You've gotten good feedback from them. They have expanded usage. And that's something that product keeps a very close tap on. And you want to give those success stories to your sales counterpart. One way of doing it is to have marketing come up with these case studies. But what I've also found is just anecdotes about a particular feature on how a customer used it, and giving a lot of anecdotes to your sales counterparts is super helpful. The fourth one is a competitive differentiation. You obviously have a really good sense of where you stack against competition, where you win, where you lose. Imparting that knowledge helps sales teams figure out how to avoid certain areas and how to talk up certain areas. And the last one, which is very, very important, is qualification criteria. So sales teams don't have a lot of time. They have a limited amount of bandwidth to reach out to the right customers and engage in conversations with them. Having a very tight qualification criteria helps them do that. So it could be, obviously there's some technical aspect to it, such as, we don't work with companies who want us to integrate with this particular data source. Knowing that obviously upfront helps. Where they need you to butt out is the things that they are very good at. How do you do discovery of what problems a company has? How do you build relationships with various stakeholders in the company to move a deal forward? How do you do negotiation and closing? So respecting their boundaries and acknowledging where they need your help and doubling down on it, again, goes a long way in building trust. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is something that comes up quite a lot and causes product people a lot of stress, which is how do you present a roadmap to sales? In every company that I've worked for, obviously salespeople ask for roadmap, and it's important, like I mentioned, but it's very, very easy to just completely fuck this up, even if you have the best of intentions. So some of the things that I've done over in my career as a product leader over the past decade or so, in terms of how I talk about the product roadmap. So let's talk about the do's. So I never present a roadmap which is in weeks. I present a roadmap in quarters or in 6 months. Weeks don't really matter. Deals don't close in weeks. Deals close in quarters. And also, a week puts a very specific constraint on you that you might not be able to. I tend to be more strategic, less tactical. So I tend to talk about this is the strategy of the company, as opposed to these are the 5 minute features we're going to be building. I try to articulate everything as pains we're solving, and I might give some sense of what the solution is, but I'm kind of light on the solution. And the reason for that is I'm essentially protecting my team, product team and engineering team, on being stuck on a particular solution that we had discussed publicly. The solution doesn't matter. Ultimately, what matters is whether you're solving a particular pain, which is important for the customer. And I always set the expectation that the roadmap is living. Living means I have the right to change it. Obviously do my best to make sure that it's the right roadmap, but things change. And whenever things change, I make a point to send out that change to sales. One of the things I've done is I would basically make a very public roadmap doc or a deck, call it the living roadmap, make it available to anyone who wants to see it. If they want to subscribe to the changes to it, they can do it so that they're all up to speed on what's happening. And I would do a presentation to the sales team every month on the latest version of the roadmap. Some of the things you should not do, which might be very obvious: don't set an exact release date for anything that you're promising to build. Never do that, because it is impossible to predict those things. And it leads to a situation where you're over-promising, under-delivering. You never want to do that. Don't promise 100% accuracy. And reason people understand that, it's difficult to be 100% accurate with a roadmap. What you also don't want to do is you don't want to be, you want to talk about the rationale of why something is in the roadmap, and you don't want to hand wave over it. So be upfront, be explicit, talk about why it's in the roadmap. Even if it's things like the board wants us to do this because the board thinks it's strategically important, totally fine. It's okay to disagree with why something is in the roadmap, but you should give the reasons why it is. The other mistake I've seen PMs do is they don't discuss the trade-offs on why something is in the roadmap. Trade-offs meaning if something is in the roadmap, some other things are probably not on the roadmap. And it's good to be explicit and say, hey, we decided not to do this thing this quarter because of these reasons. The second to final one is failure to address risks. And the risks could be, again, you don't need to give specific technical risks, but it could be something like, this is a very difficult product to build. There's a lot of, this is a machine learning product, and there's a lot of reliance on getting this certain data from our customers, which we may not be able to get. And articulating risks help people sort of conceptualize how they should be talking to their customers about future things that they want to, that the company might be building. And it leads to just better customer conversation rather than promising the moon and saying we can do all this. Because the last thing, what customers hate is if they know something is hard, and if the salesperson is saying it's not hard, you just lose credibility. And the last one is whenever you do a roadmap presentation, you always want to have some time at the end to do a post-presentation engagement where you do Q&As, you answer people's questions, you highlight why you did not do certain things that you said that they wanted to do, etc. Again, that's just good hygiene to make sure everyone's communicating with each other. Cool. So I spoke a lot. I hope this was helpful. I haven't seen the chat, but I can, Scott, it's up to you. I can spend some time answering questions.
Yeah, I think we only got probably about 5 more seconds or so. So
oh wow!
To skip that. But I encourage people to put their questions inside the Slack community. We can get them answered there. I think there's definitely some really good stuff there to share. And yeah, hopefully, I think a lot of value here. I think from a content perspective, obviously, this is a really critical relationship, particularly as go-to-market teams are closer and working more tightly together, as product and sales and all these other functions are working more tightly together. And definitely in these macroeconomic times, we need to really, really leverage this relationship and make it hum, make it its best.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Rez. Really, really fantastic.